Hello and welcome to Frontrunner Motorsport. And we have the news that Danny Ric is back in Formula 1. Sadly, replacing the incredibly unlucky Nick de Vries, who really does not deserve to be demoted, frankly. You know, Nick de Vries came in last year at Monza for Albon when he was having his issues after his appendix was taken out. And he turned up at Monza and he scored points in a car that's not very easy to score points in. Albon does it occasionally. His teammates tend not to. So Nick de Vries' Formula 1 debut was A+. He did a fantastic job. This year has not gone well. And that's not necessarily his fault, although he has made mistakes. But he is, still a rookie in Formula 1. I know he's Formula 2 and Formula E champion, but it's different and it takes time to get used to. AlphaTauri are not on the pace. They are very, very slow, usually near the back of the field. Yuki Tsunoda is on his third season. He has scored 2 points this year and he has not done much better than Nick de Vries. So it's, on the face of it, it's a strange decision. It seems like you're wasting young talent in favour of someone much older who's kind of had their time in Formula 1. Although I don't think Danny Ric's old. I think he's only early 30s at most. But he's had his day. Like, the days of Danny Ric being a future Formula 1 champion are gone. But I was sort of thinking, why have they put him in AlphaTauri? What would the reason be? And is it just Helmut Marko being insane? Possibly he is pretty nutty. But this is a more calculated move, I think. Because they have been publicly criticising Sergio Perez recently for his performances, which again, whilst poor, I think he has had a lot of bad luck as well. But they have been poor. He has made a lot of mistakes recently. So it's difficult because you have your B team is supposed to be your driver pool essentially. But neither Yuki Tsunoda or Nick de Vries are really performing that well. The obvious choice last year would have been Pierre Gasly, who is both experienced, a race winner, and he's raced in the main Red Bull team. But it took too long and he jumped ship. And now you haven't really got many choices with the experience that can handle a switch mid-season, and yet you have Danny Ric, who got booted out by McLaren, and you brought him in as a reserve. He's on standby. So maybe in an attempt to get results, it makes sense. It also makes sense in that Danny Ricciardo gets used to driving these new cars because he's had a year off. And with that, it sort of comes back full circle. Has he had a year off or only half a year? God, time is just going all over the place for me. But still, he hasn't driven a Red Bull for like a decade nearly. So it does take time to get used to running in these teams. So you stick him in an AlphaTauri for the rest of the year. He gets back up to speed. Next year, you don't want Sergio Perez anymore. You can put Daniel Ricciardo back in that Red Bull. I'm sure he would be happy playing second driver to Max Verstappen. He is also really good friends with Max Verstappen. And he is an experienced race winner. So if Max Verstappen has something go wrong, or just Danny Ric is really fast, Ricciardo could pick up wins. Something Sergio Perez hasn't done since the start of this year. So there is a lot that makes sense for Red Bull. It's just disappointing to see a young driver, Nick de Vries, who really deserved this chance in Formula 1. And, we're just kicking him aside already, and we're not even halfway through the season yet. And honestly, for AlphaTauri, which I guess next year they might be changing their name again, but they may, and apparently in terms of developing the car, they are going to be, I think Helmut Marko said, as close to Red Bull as the rules allow. So I'm guessing they're taking advantage of being the B team and using as much data as they're allowed to use. Makes sense. I think they'll have 2 new drivers next year, and if I was Helmut Marko, I would go for Ayumu Iwasa and Liam Lawson. 2 drivers who I think are very, very good. Iwasa's not had the best of luck in Formula 2 this year, and he is starting to drop away from the title picture. But start of this year, he was fantastic, and he has time to get back into the fight, and I'm sure he'll at least take a couple more wins this year. Liam Lawson went over to Super Formula. It was always 50-50 over what would happen to him. Would he fail in Japan and just sort of slip into obscurity, or make a success of it and at the very least follow Nick Cassidy's path and at least get into like Formula E or something, or just some other high-end single-seaters like maybe IndyCar or World Endurance Championship right now, which is also pretty hot. So, and he's doing a fantastic job in Super Formula. Jumped straight in the car, won his debut, and he's been fantastic ever since. Definitely within a shout with a title as well. And really, the Super Formula has already come down to 3 drivers. It's Miata versus Najiri and Liam Lawson. So Liam Lawson is much less experienced than those two in Super Formula. He's taken to the Japanese tracks very, very well. It's going to be an exciting end to the Super Formula season just because it's going to be interesting to see how Liam Lawson does. I think he's already done enough to claim a Formula 1 seat. But I think for Tsunoda and De Vries, it's a shame if they did get booted out. And it looks like De Vries, I can't see another team picking him up. Maybe McLaren as a reserve driver, or maybe going back into the Mercedes fold. But if not, where's he going to go in Formula E? Again, like a mid-table team might open a door to him. Maybe Mahindra gets with Degrassi and takes De Vries instead. But he'll do as well as Degrassi's doing at Mahindra. So it's not a great move career-wise for him. And probably the best bet right now, World Endurance Championship. I keep saying it, but the hypercar class is fantastic. And, you know, a team like Porsche, Lamborghini jumping in next year, BMW jumping in next year, they would love to have a driver with Nick De Vries's championship wins like in the car, because he can offer so much. Will Daniel Ricciardo get that seat at Red Bull? Time will tell. I think it depends a lot on how Sergio Perez does. I don't think they're going to get rid of Perez this year. I think that's just too much for muck around. But if they do, Ricciardo is pretty much the perfect driver to replace him with. Someone the team's familiar with, Max Verstappen's happy with. It's honestly, the idea of Verstappen and Ricciardo at Red Bull is tempting, to say the least. I think that would probably be the pairing that would get the best results for Red Bull. Despite the fact that Verstappen and Perez will probably win Drivers' and Constructors' Championships, first and second in the table, I can't see anyone stopping them from doing that. And I think Perez, all he has to do is sort of straighten up, get some decent results on the just take another win somewhere, kick on from there, and put on a decent fight for second. Try and get it done a couple of races before the end, and just don't catch Verstappen, because I mean he's already 100 points ahead of you, so that's like 4 races in the bag. It's going to be an interesting end to the year just to see what happens with these drivers, just to see what Red Bull do. And, you know, I feel really bad for Nick De Vries because I am a big fan of his. I think, honestly, apart from Verstappen, obviously, one of the best Dutch drivers out there. And, you'd think Verstappen would go to bat for his countrymen, but obviously, I know that he's really good friends with Ricciardo, so I don't know if he had any kind of friendship with De Vries. I presume they at least talk sometimes. But it's going to be interesting to see what De Vries does in the future if a Formula 1 team does go for him. Maybe Alfa Romeo, if they don't keep Bottas or Guan Yu Zhou. Maybe they'll throw a bone to Nick De Vries. We'll have to see. They're not in a great position either. So, I mean, the Formula 1 field is pretty much split in half right now, with Red Bull, Mercedes, Ferrari and Aston Martin right now being the top teams. You kind of have Alpine and McLaren in the middle, and then below that AlphaTauri, Alfa Romeo, Haas and Williams tend not to score points or just get scraps. And, you know, it's not necessarily very exciting to watch. It also doesn't show what those drivers can do, which is unfortunate, but that's motor racing and it's a business, and this was probably a business decision, so we'll have to see how it works out. But they were just my, 10-minute thoughts. I'm not going to say quick. But subscribe to the channel. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you very much for watching. I'll be covering the Formula E this weekend as well, so stick around for that. And have a good one.